Okay, so first, thank you for joining us. Whether you're a applicant of this round or you're just looking for some expert advice on adopting sustainable practices to your business and a more circular way of doing things, I'm sure the workshop will be of use to you. So just before I hand over to Peter and Louisa, who are from Zero Waste Scotland, and I'll let them introduce themselves when they come on to speak. Just a quick word from me, a little couple of pointers around the edge in the application process for us and around impact. So the reason we partnered with Zero Waste Scotland back in, I think, 2019, I think it was because we were keen to, sorry, just let someone in. We were keen to help businesses explore and a more circular way of doing things, and just using our competition process to do that. Now, naturally, we're all aware now more than ever that we all have a role to play and a responsibility to help the planet and the people around us. But we also know that just having that sustainable mindset and that practice in your business from the onset can result in things like increased profitability, can increase your customer demographics, and so from us it's a quality thing for us to be try to find those businesses early on, as well as doing our part for the planet and the people around us. So just a final thing to keep in mind from me before I hand over is that we introduced this impact criteria to the EDGE application a few rounds ago to address the areas that I mentioned. But what we find helps strengthen an application is to help if you consider how to quantify what you're telling us. So, for example, we often hear that people will plant a tree for every product that they sell, which is great to hear, but help us believe that you've not just said that as to tick a box. Help us understand that you know what that means. How if you're doing that, how many trees is that? How does that carbon offset impact the wider environment, the wider community? So just shows that you're thinking about this, and it's not just you're not just ticking a box to help get something extra in the application. So we want to know that you're thinking about your impact as a business. Something else we've picked up on recent rounds is that people are talking more and more about the environment in their business model, which is great. We're encouraging that, but something that gets left out is the kind of social aspect of that, the people. So we want to know that's something you're considering as well. So if you mention things like the living wage, non-use of 0 hours contracts, workplace diversity, those are all things that have been missing in recent rounds from through all applications. So it'd be good to see a bit more of those if you're coming through. So yeah, I've talked enough, so I'll hand over to Peter now. And if you missed that at the start, if you have a question, please feel free to use the chat function. And if we can answer in real time, we will. If not, we'll maybe put it to Peter or Louisa at the end. And again, if we'll maybe open up the Q&A at the end as well if there's time. So thank you again for joining us, and I'll just hand over to Peter or Louisa, who wants to come on first.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm really pleased to be delivering this session in partnership with EDGE this afternoon. I'll just do very quick introductions before we start. So I'm Peter McCafferty. I'm one of Zero Waste Scotland's Circular Economy Business Support Service partners, and I've been working with the SME community in Scotland for a number of years now, and kind of more recently the non-SME community, to deliver the Circular Economy Business Support Service, which includes sessions like this to raise awareness and build understanding, but we also deliver a program of kind of direct support as well. So that's kind of my area and my background, and I'll let Louisa say hello.
Hi everyone. Yes, so I'm a business support partner at Zero Waste Scotland as well, leading on our SME work. I've worked with Zero Waste Scotland for about 7 years now. So background in sort of food waste reduction, general energy efficiency, the upcoming Scotland deposit return scheme, but more recently on providing support specifically to businesses interested in pursuing circular economy business models. So yeah, look forward to engaging with you more during the session.
Right, so today's session really is designed to provide a bit of an overview and an introduction to the circular economy, and we'll also get into some practical examples and inspiration for how you can hopefully implement circular economy in your own business. or at least start to think about implementing it. And we hope that the session will support you to recognise maybe even that circularity already does exist in your business. But at the very least, we hope that it will help to kind of identify opportunities for future potential. And obviously by doing so, the idea is that you can strengthen your business, and in the immediate short term, you can also enhance, hopefully, your application to this round of EDGE. The session is intended as a primer, so it is an overview. It introduces quite a lot of concepts, but we've also got a mixture of real life examples and case studies that hopefully make the theory a bit more relatable. And as Jack's already said, hopefully we should have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So please keep any questions in mind or pop them in the chat if you don't want to forget about them. Okay, if we could move on to the next slide, Louisa, please. So just a little bit of background for anyone who's not familiar with Zero Waste Scotland. We're an independent body. We operate via funding from the Scottish Government and the European Union. And essentially we exist to lead Scotland to use products and resources more responsibly, focusing on where we can have the greatest impact to address climate change. And in short, we want to accelerate and support Scotland's just transition to a circular economy. And we work in partnership directly with businesses, but also through organisations like EDGE. So the fact that we're able to reach out to you guys today is fantastic. In 2016, the Scottish Government released its Making Things Last strategy, which was essentially a circular economy plan for Scotland. And since then, we've been facilitating the growth and promoting the concept of a circular economy. In terms of some of our wider work, this has involved activities to support a food waste reduction target, the deposit return scheme that Louisa mentioned, and a lot more kind of wider activity around energy efficiency, waste management, and policy and research. But today, specifically focusing on the circular economy, although it does encompass some of those other areas, obviously, but we want to kind of try and specifically focus in on some of the language and the theory and the principles of circular economy. So, having said that, what is a circular economy? Before we kind of get into the detail of it, we've got a very quick quiz just to kind of get you thinking a little bit differently. Circular economy is a different approach. It's an alternative economic model. So it does require to think outside the box sometimes. So just a little bit of fun, and you can stick answers in the chat if you feel so inclined. But on average, what percentage do you think that the average standard domestic car is used for as a percentage of its life? Any ideas? So I can't actually see the chat. Oh, here we go, 5% from Andrew. Zora, 10%. Another 10% from Ken. Okay, so well, the answer is it's used for 8% of its life and parked for 92% of its life. Which, you know, is a great example really of an idle asset, and the value of the asset just kind of sitting there parked up. Our next kind of example or question: on average, how many minutes is a standard domestic household drill used for in its lifetime? $30 minutes, 600 minutes, 50 minutes, 180 minutes. We've got some keen DIYers, I think, today. I don't think my drill is used anywhere near as much as that. Okay, the actual stat is 13 minutes. Again, that's just, you know, really an example of the fact that you've got multiple, you know, many multiples of households buying drills, the material and the resources that are tied up in those and actually they're sitting idle for quite a lot of the time. So the question is, does everybody really need to have a drill, or do you just need it when you need it? And then finally, from farm to fork, what percentage of food is wasted? And this is, I think this is a fairly well-known stat now. We might need to refresh our figures a little bit. 30% from Sabrina, 20%. I think there was a 35 there, 40, 45. So the answer is a staggering 33% is wasted, 6% is used. So when you think about all of the resources, it's not just the food itself, obviously, but it's the resources that are tied up in the growing of that, the water use, the land use, the time, energy. It's a significant waste. So hopefully you can see from these examples that, the way we do things traditionally doesn't always make total sense. And the circular economy gives us a framework to start thinking differently about how we can interact with products and services. So that's just a little bit of a warm-up. But moving on to talk about the circular economy properly. So we live in a world of finite resources. Global population and consumption growth are driving increased volatility in the supply of raw materials. I think we all know this. I mean, in the past 5 years, in Scotland alone, we've imported about £50 million worth of gold, and that's hidden away in TVs, mobile phones, other IT equipment. And that's obviously, that is a valuable asset. It's a finite asset, but we'll recover only a tiny fraction of that gold. The rest of it will, languish in drawers or cupboards, or even, end up in landfill where it's lost. As another example, the equivalent of one rubbish truck of textiles is landfilled or burned every second across the world, which is a staggering image, really. I think it's quite horrendous. So these are clear examples of our linear economy approach, one that we've followed since the Industrial Revolution. It's based very much on take, make, dispose. So we extract resources from the ground, we use them to manufacture products, we then use those products, and when we no longer want them, we dispose of them. And projections indicate that if we continue on our current trajectory, in 30 years, we'll be creating 70% more waste than we currently do already, which, I mean, it goes without saying that that's just unsustainable. So the linear approach has to change, and the circular economy can provide the solution. By making a fundamental shift in the way that we design products and services, the circular economy offers a new and exciting perspective. So in a circular economy, economic activity is based on the continuous circulation of products and materials. And it's a model that essentially eliminates, or at the very least redefines, the concept of waste. And it aims to maximize material value at all stages of the life cycle. So it's an industrial economy still, but it's restorative by intention and design. So it tries to minimize the negative impact that the model has on society, on the planet, on the environment, but also actively tries to regenerate and do good at the same time. And like we see in nature, one of the main principles of the circular economy is that waste is food, essentially. And what that means is that we need to kind of shift to a mindset where all materials and products are seen only as temporary repositories of materials, which would be the equivalent of nutrients in the natural world. And those materials will subsequently become the inputs for new products at the end of their usable life. So we have to maintain access and keep everything in circulation, basically. And that concept of waste is eliminated in a circular economy by carefully designing products and industrial processes in such a way that materials are kept in a perpetual flow in either the biological cycle or the technical cycle. And to go over that in a little bit more detail, but in kind of an easy and accessible way, we've got a really nice little video from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which provides a clear and accessible overview of the circular economy. So we'll play that now. don't think we've got sound.
I don't know if this is helpful without sound or not.
Oh, I can hear it coming through now. It's just very quiet.
Can you boost the audio at your end, Louise, at all? Just by turning up a little on the player.
Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term.
Has that helped at all?
Yeah. I think I'm getting something if I turn mine up a little bit.
Works, can we change our way of thinking so that we too operate a circular economy? Let's start with the biological cycle. How can our waste build up rather than reduce it? By rethinking and redesigning products and components and the packaging they come in, we can create safe and compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throwaway and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated. One solution may be to rethink the way we view ownership. What if we never actually owned our technologies? We simply licensed them from the manufacturers. Now, let's put these two cycles together. Imagine if we could design products to come back to their makers, their technical materials being reused, and their biological parts increasing agricultural value. And imagine that these products are made and transported using renewable energy. Here we have a model that builds prosperity long term. And the good news is there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and economy coming together. It's about energy. It's about rethinking the operating system itself. We have a fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. Instead of remaining trapped in the frustrations of the present, with creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future.
Okay, hopefully you were able to lean in close and hear the audio there, but we'll share the link to that video afterwards, because it is a pretty neat little summary and overview of of the principle, I guess, of the circular economy. So moving on then to what does that actually mean in practice for you as a business? There obviously, aside from the environmental impact, there are a number of commercial and economic benefits to this model that are worth thinking about. So it can remove supply chain risks is the first thing, and you recently spoke to a business who said to let us know that cardboard prices for them had increased by 600% throughout the course of the pandemic over the last kind of 18 months or 2 years. And even more recently than that, we've all experienced kind of challenges around increased gas and energy prices and general price inflation as well. So if you have a reliance on a continuous flow of materials, you're open to significant price increases or supply chain collapse. but reducing or entirely removing that reliance on virgin material inputs can reduce your exposure to that risk, and actually kind of it gives you a bit more control over your own supply chain if you're able to access materials and assets by take-back seams, for example, which is something that we'll talk about a bit later on. Meeting to customer demand, yeah, we've all seen, climate protests taking place across the world, and the sort of blue planet David Attenborough effect. So consumers are demanding action. The landscape is undoubtedly changing, and businesses need to be seen to address those demands. And I think that not taking notice of that demand will mean that potentially competitors will become the favoured option if they are seen to be more environmentally conscious or more sustainable. And this isn't just about greenwashing, obviously, it is about meaningful change, and actually committing to and making a real difference. So just some statistics kind of on that, some recent surveys, I think a Nielsen report and an Accenture survey revealed that more than a third of business executives couldn't keep up with consumer demand for sustainable products and services. And about 66% of consumers say they're willing to pay more for sustainable brands. So obviously that is a business opportunity, but it's more than a business opportunity. I think it very much is a change in the consumer landscape. And this is something that is increasingly important. Maintaining custom, I think, is the third option. Yeah, so how does that work? Well, a circular economy allows you to retain customers through alternative models like product as a service, and services like repair and refurbishment, or leasing and sharing products, rather than just kind of a single point transaction, because it means that your customers will look to you for ongoing support and maintenance, or it means that they will return their product directly to you at the end of use or at the end of life. And that obviously keeps you close to your customers, and it allows you to meet their evolving needs. And again, a bit of a stat to back that up from a recent Forbes study: 88% of consumers have kind of stated that they will be more loyal to a company that supports social or environmental issues. So again, just that longevity. And I think it goes without saying that the circular economy opens up new and innovative business opportunities. By adopting innovative approaches, you can reach new markets, you can diversify your business, you can future-proof it and make it more resilient. And yeah, it just opens up kind of whole new avenues of exploration and whole new ways of kind of delivering products and services, as well as innovation around the design of products and services themselves. So, and again, we'll look at some examples of that next. And then finally, of course, environmental and social benefits. So I'm not going to preach. I think everyone at this stage in the game is aware of, the scale of where we're at in the climate emergency. But ultimately, the main driver and the benefit behind sustainable business practices is reducing the impact, or reducing the negative impact on the environment, and hopefully having a positive contribution to addressing the problem. We've all heard, the stats that there'll be more plastic in the sea than fish by 2050, and that extinction is happening 100 times faster than the natural evolutionary rate. So it is very timely. And Jack spoke at the beginning of this session about the kind of wider social elements that Edge would like to see in your applications, and circular economy also does have the potential for significant social change as well as environmental impact, because it's more than just recycling. It is a system change, and it offers the potential to address things like inequality, social cohesion, and improved living standards through job creation, and moving away from damaging environmental practices. So it is quite a wide and far-reaching philosophy, I guess, and approach. But the key takeaway is that sustainability shouldn't just be viewed as a tick box. It really needs to be embedded into how we do business, and the circular economy gives us a real framework in which to do that. So I think at that point, or at this point, I'm going to hand over to Louisa to run through some of the specific circular strategies that we've identified.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yes, so I'm going to take us through the 9 circular economy strategies. So these are different business models that help to illustrate how you can transition to something more circular. So for each of these, I'm going to explain what it looks like and then give an example of a local Scottish business that has pursued this particular business model. So our first one is circular design. And this is thinking about the circularity of your product from the very outset. So considering things such as repair and reuse, recycling and repurposing when you're actually designing the product. So how do you ensure that the product can stand the test of time by considering the quality of the materials, whether it can be easily repaired or elements replaced as and when required. And then when it finally does reach the end of its life, whether it can be easily dismantled for effective recycling or repurposing. So it's really thinking about design in the early stages and embedding all those concepts into what you're creating. Our example here is Sofa for Life, and they're a Scottish-based company. Zero Waste Scotland provided them with some support in their early years, and they've designed a sofa with modular add-ons and exchangeable covers and cushions so that the sofa can be adapted over the years to suit the needs of the owner. So for example, you could start off with a 2-seater green sofa, and as your needs change, you could then buy a modular add-on to turn it into a 3-seater sofa or a corner sofa. Or if you redecorated the room, you might decide to go for blue covers rather than green covers. So it just means that you're staying with the modular existing units and just adding to them as and when required, rather than having to replace the sofa altogether. So circular design can be applied to pretty much any product or service. I have a video of another example. I think in this case the sound probably doesn't matter too much, so I'm gonna show this one and you'll get the idea of it. But as Peter said, we can circulate links to all the videos afterwards so you can watch them again in your own time if you're keen. There we go. So a nice design example of where, waste has just essentially been designed out completely. It won't exist at the end of the product's lifetime. So yeah, a good example. Our second circular strategy is resource recovery. So quite a simple product, a simple concept where you take a waste or a byproduct, so either your own or that of another company's, and you turn it into something with a higher value. So it could be a food and drink waste or byproduct. So you have things like whey, spent brewery grain, distillery byproducts, or it could be offcuts of fabric or material in the manufacturing process. There's certainly plenty of waste out there to pick from. Our example is Revive Eco. And they are a Glasgow-based company run by 2 graduates of Strathclyde Uni, and its impacts in terms of deforestation. So, you're replacing something with a waste product. So, positives all round. So our third strategy is enabling technologies. So new technologies, they carry immense opportunities to transform the way that we do business. So this would cover things like robotics, machine learning, big data, blockchain. There's lots of different areas where a discarded iPhone in only 11 seconds, and it's able to separate the component parts into reusable materials, including gold, to a value of $40 million. So Peter was referring earlier to sort of the gold lost in all our equipment. So, big companies are starting to develop solutions to ensure that we're extracting that gold and not letting it go to waste. So an example a little closer to home is Reef. So things like crutches or wheelchairs that go out into the community, and you want to assess those and keep track of those. So our fourth strategy is product as a service, and this one requires us to take a bit of a step back and start asking questions. So do companies really need a product, or do they actually need a solution? So does a farmer really need pesticides, for example? What is your customer actually getting? What is the service that you're providing via your product? So can you flip things, on its head and provide a service instead? An example of this is Egg Lighting, and they're a company that offer lighting as a service. So you get a lifetime performance guarantee of the product and the potential to upgrade to more efficient lighting, but this is a no purchase agreement. So instead of buying a light fitting, you're actually paying for the lumens of light that you receive. So a really, really interesting concept that, you wouldn't necessarily think that, you'd buy lighting as a service. You just, you go out, you buy a light fitting, your light bulb, etc., and then you own it. So it's really thinking about things in a slightly different way. And like I say, it can be applied to lots of different areas. So our fifth strategy, this is kind of a similar concept. So it's framing it in a slightly different way. So it also means that the ownership of the product is maintained by the manufacturer rather than being taken on by the customer. So this means that the ongoing reliability and eventual post-use value of the product becomes more important to the manufacturer, because they're the one that's going to have to service it. They're the ones that are going to have to come out and fix it and repair it if required. So that pushes them to consider the whole lifespan in the initial design and development of the product. So example here is Graceful Changes. So they're an Edinburgh-based company, and they offer children's and babies' clothing under a subscription model. So each subscriber has access to an online inventory, allowing the customers to choose which items they'd like to receive. So for a standard package of £30 a month, you get 15 items delivered to your door. And when you need to exchange clothing, so for example, for the next size up, for special occasion, holidays, etc., you can choose a new selection of clothes and swap them for the old ones. And the used clothes are then assessed for repair, and if suitable, they go back into the inventory of items ready to be leased by someone else. I was going to show you another leasing example of iLikes, but I think this one you do need to hear the background sound, so I think I'll skip over this one. But it was a similar idea where children's bikes can be leased out. Obviously, children's bikes, they grow out of them fairly quickly. They maybe only keep them for a couple of years or so. So the concept was that you hire out this bike to a family for a couple of years. When they've outgrown it, that bike then gets returned to Isla Bikes. They refurbish it if required, repaint it, check all the brakes, gears, etc. And then it's ready to be leased by a new family. So really nice idea. So like I say, we'll share the video afterwards so that you can have a look at it if you'd like. So our sixth strategy is remanufacturing. And this is exactly what it says on the tin. So dismantling a product and repairing or replacing each part to produce a new product that matches or exceeds the quality of the original. So really quite a simple concept. An excellent example is Renewable Parts. And they're based in Lochilphead, and they refurbished used wind turbine components, so things such as gears. So they test and recertify them, ready for reuse. So in an industry that's already known for being, very green, so producing carbon-free electricity, they're going the extra mile to ensure that the industry really is as sustainable as possible by reusing these parts, which are heavy metals. And really the lifetime of those parts can easily be extended with a bit of care and effort. So the seventh strategy is reuse, and really this is the simplest strategy there is. So it's continuing to use products as they were originally intended for as long as possible, and this will always be more sustainable than creating new products and replacing them or disposing of old products. So it's a no-brainer. Again, if you think about the energy and resource that goes into recycling products, to transport it, potentially melt it down, reform it, etc. That's a lengthy and carbon-consuming process. So by reusing it in its current form will always be better. The example we have here is Beauty Kitchen. They are based in Glasgow, and they're a skincare company dedicated to building sustainability into every aspect of the company. So they've developed their return, refill, repeat model. This is where bottles are reused to create a circular packaging system. So customers can either post back their empty container or return it to a participating store. And the Beauty Kitchen will clean and refill the containers, ready to be sold again. And this service is not only being offered for their own products, but also offering it as a service to other businesses interested in refillable packaging models. So our penultimate model is repair. So this is an approach that has unfortunately grown quite uncommon in today's society. The relative cheapness of goods makes it easier and often more cost effective to buy a new item than to repair it. But people are becoming far more eco-conscious, and businesses are starting to sort of take advantage of this movement. One such business is Cashmere Circle. I just realised it was already up there. They're a startup that launched last year, and they offer a repair service for old cashmere items, which are typically quite tricky to repair. So they will mend any holes, they'll remove any stains, they'll revive the yarns and make it as good as new. And this is all offered as part of an online postage service. So our final strategy is the sharing economy. And this is where businesses retain ownership of the product and allow the items to be shared within the local economy and local community. So Boris Bikes or Just Eat Bikes are quite a good example. But an example closer to Edinburgh Tool Library. There's also tool libraries in Stirling. I'm trying to think Glasgow might have one as well, but they're certainly popping up in a lot of places. So the concept is that for £30 a year, you can have access to thousands of tools, and this makes it far more cost effective and accessible to individuals, and removes the need for everyone to have an individual drill or electric sander or wallpaper stripper, when realistically, as we heard earlier, it's only used for about 13 minutes a year. So this is maximising the utilisation of this equipment. I popped in another example here, which is from Adventure Oban. I think this is still in development, but it's an adventure library. So a really nice idea, having a library of kind of sporting and outdoor gear. So things like paddle boards or wetsuits, tennis rackets. So again, this is allowing a greater access to these items to people that otherwise may not be able to afford them if, you know, buying them themselves. And, you know, we've all got sporting equipment probably hidden away in a cupboard somewhere or in the garage that only gets used once or twice a year. So this way it's maximising the utilisation of that equipment and improving accessibility and making it more affordable. So yeah, sharing economies are a really nice one. So I think reached the end there, Peter. So those are all the models. What I would say is that it's not necessarily a case of picking one model. There are lots of examples out there that have combined a number of them. So you could, using a bike as an example, you could go to an effort of ensuring from a circular design perspective that it is designed for repair and recyclability. You could then lease that bike and offer it as a service. And then when you take back that bike, you could, improve it, repair it, and ensure it's ready to be used by someone else. And then ensure that at the end of its life, the component parts can actually be recycled. So there's lots of different ways of, you know, combining these strategies to come up with something that's as circular as possible. So yeah, you don't necessarily just need to focus on one model. But Peter, I'll pass back over to you.
Thanks, Louisa. Yeah, I think what's really great about these strategies that we've kind of identified, and we've not invented them by any means. We've tried to kind of classify a lot of the things that we've seen out there and make them consistent. But what Louisa says is right. There's so many different options and combinations of the options out there that really the possibilities are kind of limitless. And the other thing I think that's useful to bear in mind is that it's not always about thinking differently within your own business, but also looking, more widely to what options already exist and what can you tap into, as a business. Could you actually become a customer of a repair or a service model, for example? You don't necessarily have to provide it yourself. So hopefully that's been quite inspirational. Some of those examples have struck a chord, some of the case studies. But you may well be sitting there thinking, well, okay, that's great, but so what? What do I do next? I can't wholesale reinvent my business in the next few weeks. And I think it's not necessarily about reinventing the wheel in terms of coming up with the next super product to fix climate change, although that would be great, obviously. But through these 9 strategies, we really want businesses to be circular by default and sustainable by default. So it's about embedding as many of the principles really as you can, not just into products and services, but into almost the very fabric of your business and the way that you do business to make the business as sustainable as possible. So don't get kind of pigeonholed into thinking that you have to have a sustainable product or a green product or a green service. It's much more fundamental than that in terms of your kind of business approach. But I just wanted to kind of finish up very briefly really so obviously Zero Waste Scotland works in partnership with Edge. We sponsor the Circular Economy Edge Award. And through that process, we often sit on the judging panel, so we see a lot of the pitches and we see a lot of the applications. And I just wanted to share some very quick thoughts really on how you can best incorporate circular economy into an application, or at least tease it out in an application. If you're early in the journey, it can still be really relevant to you. So the first point that I've put down there really is it never is too early to start thinking about these issues. If you are a young company or a startup, even, it's better to design them in from the start than you know, go so far down a journey and then have to kind of realign your business somehow. And equally, if you are a much more established company, it's never too late to start thinking about it. You know, what does the next iteration of the company look like? Demonstrate that you've thought ahead to consider the impact of your product or your service at all stages of its life cycle. I think, you know, Louisa and I have worked with a great many businesses over the last few years, and quite often businesses will be very focused on a particular innovation or, you know, a particular element of their product that makes it very sustainable, or it makes it very eco-friendly. But actually they've not thought about the whole life of that product, and they've not thought about what will happen to it during its use phase. What happens if it breaks? What happens once the customer is done with it? What's the end of life options? So, you know, think about that and demonstrate that you've thought about that. And again, you don't actually need to have something in place at the moment, but I think the very fact that you are considering these issues and the implications for what you're doing as a business, you know, add real value. Think beyond your own processes. By that, I mean, think beyond what you are kind of doing within the confines of your own, you know, bricks and mortar, your own factory, your own processes. So think beyond recycling and energy use, which obviously, again, are extremely important and fundamentally important, but consider more widely the customer. What happens at end of life? What's the impact on your supply chain, for example, things like that. And then also think about what you can enable others to do. So what elements of circularity can you assist with in other businesses, and what elements of circularity can you adopt into your business through procurement, for example. And then finally, I think, again, just to kind of hammer home the point that some of these are really big changes and fundamental changes, and you don't necessarily need to have the answers right now or be doing these things right now, but have a plan. As a responsible business, you do need to be thinking about them, I think. So have a plan, get it down on paper, and really be able to demonstrate your aspirations. And then, you know, document the actions and the timelines and get them clearly captured, because these are the kind of commitments that are going to become increasingly important, and investors, I think, and customers as well are going to want to know that as a responsible business, you're thinking about these things and you've got a plan, an action plan in place. So there was just a few things kind of really that sprung to mind when I was reflecting on that kind of assessment process. Hopefully those are useful. But if we just flip to the next slide, we'll kind of wrap up by saying that our Circular Economy Accelerator is available online, and the address is there, and obviously we'll share the slides. But there's many more kind of resources online there. The strategies are there. There's a whole host more case studies and examples of some of these strategies in practice. And we've also got a couple of kind of self-assessment toolkits and something called the 30 Ideas tool to kickstart your circular business. So again, if you're just looking for a bit of inspiration, or you want to revisit some of what we've talked about already this afternoon, please jump onto the accelerator and have a look around. It's a good resource. We're working to evolve it and kind of strengthen what is there. But that brings us to the end of the kind of formal presentation element. And I think we've got time for questions if there are any. But thank you for listening.
Yeah,
And I don't know if Jack maybe wants to jump back in at this point, or if anyone's got any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So there's nothing came into the chat question-wise, but if anyone wants to turn on a mic or come on camera, and if they're more comfortable doing that way, feel free to ask away if there's anything at this point.
It's Ken Hoskins.
Yeah, Ken, hi.
Yeah, from Frisco e-bikes and Frisco Solar Docs. So obviously the biking side of things. One of the things we have a challenge is looking at environmental and social governance investors, finding investors that match what we're doing in terms of circular economy. You know, it's incorporated in our design. Is that something that you have contacts with? Yeah, because that's one of the things we're trying to explore. I know it's outside the Scottish Edge process, but you know, investors at the moment have been holding on to their money in some ways to get companies through the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And people are talking about investing in green technologies, etc. But we're not seeing that so visible. Actually doing it, we're talking about it, but not doing it. And what you're obviously encouraging, in some cases, has an initial cost impact for businesses. So to get it off the ground, it has a payback over time. And there's any way you can kind of point us in one in terms of the ESG investors, but also how to demonstrate the attractiveness to investors of what you're proposing. It's a bit of a long question.
No, it's a really good question, a valuable question. I'll let Louisa jump in at any point as well. But I mean, so in short, the investment landscape is, you know, as you know, it's complex. I mean, there are a number of, I think what we've seen is that there are a number of smaller kind of green or sustainable investment groups cropping up who are looking specifically for circular or sustainable investments. And I can probably share a couple of references for those, but it's certainly, I think one of the challenges of circular economy in particular is that it can be, you know, it can be kind of complex to explain what you're doing, or it's not necessarily well understood by traditional investment routes. And I think that there is a bit of work around that for agencies like Zero Waste Scotland to look at. We, you know, for our part, we try and support through, you know, grant funding and other opportunities like that, but obviously that's not ideal for every scenario. But I think in terms of mainstreaming sustainable investment, yeah, I mean, I think the change is coming. I think it is happening, and we can certainly, in terms of demonstrating green credentials, if you like, through ESG. That is one of the things I think, Louisa, that we're seeing a lot more requests for through the business support that we're able to provide. So potentially worth exploring.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned grant funding. I'll be interested on that side as well. But, again, if you could add that either in the link or information that you send out after today's event, that would be great. But thanks for what you said. It's been useful. The challenge on the application form is that you've only got 200 words for that section on for you guys, and trying to capture everything we do and what you're looking for is a bit of a challenge, but that's the same for everybody. So
yeah, I mean, what would maybe I'd say on that point, Ken, as well, with application, you know, they are supposed to be succinct, and they come across, you know, there's so many applications to go through, but we appreciate it as a challenge. So in something like that, if you have something that you feel you're not quite getting across in the application, then that's when you can maybe use your video as a little bit as a tool there to get more across, and use something that's quite key and quite vital to get across in that 3 minutes. I know 3 minutes isn't a great deal of time, but if there's something additionally that you want to fit in there, then that's what will be shown to the assessors prior to all sitting down and assessing things. So it's probably the last thing they see before they make a decision on you. So get something really crucial in there if it's important to your application, if you haven't got the room in there. But yeah, we appreciate it's not always the easiest to get into a short box or a short word count.
thank you. I'll let others come in with their questions. Thank you.
So just a couple through in the chat there. I think kind of a similar vein, just so any additional tips for, I think, different sectors of business, so like office-based, online, and an app. Is there varying levels of advice there, or something? So for someone saying office or online, and another one's saying an app, is there different advice you would give to different sectors, or different?
See, Louise has come off mute, so
yeah, I mean, it's difficult to answer without knowing exactly what that office-based business does or what that app is offering. So I don't think I could answer specifically there unless we get some more information. But even at an office space, I think thinking more. Oh, there we've got an answer there. Online learning, but thinking about the waste that you might be creating internally. And how you could build that out of your model. So looking at your waste streams, and that isn't just your typical waste streams, looking at your recycling bin or your landfill bin. This is actually thinking about the equipment that you buy, the furniture that you use, the lighting that you have, the heating and energy requirements that the building requires. So try to think, in broader terms, rather than just what you would typically class as waste, because I think we're all guilty of forgetting that actually, office equipment quite often ends up in landfill. We decide to replace it, and there's some really interesting models out there where you can rent office equipment, or there are services where they take back used office equipment and offer it to other businesses or charitable organizations. So yeah, often it's thinking just more broadly about the waste that you might create, and the suppliers that you use, and encouraging them to think about waste as well. So you might receive things in packaging. Could that packaging be returnable? Could you encourage your suppliers to consider what they're doing and say, actually, it's really important for us as a company that we cut out all packaging. So, we're not going to buy from you anymore. We're going to buy from this other company because they don't have the same amount of packaging. So it's putting pressure on your suppliers as well. So I hope that helps to answer. Might be worth just saying from an app perspective, we've worked with a number of companies that are developing apps in order to facilitate some of the models that we've spoken about. So for example, rental apps, so creating a platform which encourages people to share items or lease their items. So the business itself that's offering that service is just providing the app platform to do that, whereas it's the community around them. They're actually offering the products as a service, or under a rental model. So apps are a really good way of offering that service as well. So yeah, lots of different ideas out there.
Yeah. So just additionally from your perspective on, if it is, for example, like an online thing, an app, something that's going to have, it's still got a carbon footprint of some sort. So that very cliched example we gave at the start, if you're going to try and offset that, what is it, the impact of the carbon production that your app, your online service is offering, and then so what kind of offset are you using against that, and what's the wider impact of that? So just for us, for Edge, who some of the assessors won't be experts in this area and may turn to Zero Waste Scotland for advice, something just quite simplified like that shows us you get that kind of understanding, or you're thinking in those areas, is useful for an application point of view. Just that you've given some consideration to that would be helpful for us. So I don't know if there's anything else if anyone has any more questions, or if Louise or Peter, you have anything to add?
I actually had a quick question. Sorry, can I just jump in? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I'll be honest, when the circular economy question came up in the application, I did kind of panic a little bit and think, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And similar to Scott in chat, I'm developing an app as well, and trying to, open my mind a little bit to try and understand a little bit more about how that works. But I think actually you've explained it really well, in a lot of detail, the 9 different points of, the circular economy. But they were all kind of focused on like the end product rather than like what the business actually does. Because obviously, like as an app developer, like there's no product, I'm not physically shipping anything to anybody. Like that app can't be recycled. It's kind of, I guess, completely different. So what I'm trying to ask is, or probe from you a little bit is, in the answer for the circular economy, should I take more of the stance around what the business is using to try and, you know, reuse and recycle like computers or lease equipment, that kind of thing, rather than focusing on the end user's journey?
Well, I mean, sorry, Peter, do you want to go or do you?
Well, I was just going to very briefly say, I think that probably is, you know, that is the approach, and it is useful to try and, I mean, I completely take your point, Andrew, about, you know, physical products versus services, but I think it's useful just to try and differentiate, you know, in your head the difference between a business that is delivering a circular product or service versus a business that is itself, you know, circular. So it's very much about the kind of things you identified. What are you doing as a business? And Louisa talked about, you know, products and services. How are you what are you procuring? How are you accessing, you know, office and IT equipment and all those kind of things. So that's where I would recommend focusing on. And also, I mean, just obviously it'll vary with scale and things, but you can also potentially do some pretty creative things with, you know, if you've got servers or data centers that are generating heat, can you capture and use that heat somehow? Or if you're having to cool them, how are you cooling them? So things like that can potentially offer up other opportunities to be creative and to reduce your impact as well. That would be classed as kind of circular solutions.
That's really good.
Yeah. From your core business.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. And another thing I was just quickly going to jump in. Sorry, I realise we're over time, but you know, gigs.ai, which was, you know, in the Edge last year, they plant a tree for every because they're like a gig economy platform. So for every job that is successfully filled, they plant a tree. So I quite like that idea of having that as a kind of, it's not really a circular economy, but it's almost like a sustainable goal, isn't it? It's actually helping with the SDGs instead. So I guess something like that could be quite useful as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep, definitely. And just to add to what Peter was saying, there's not much. I think he covered it all really well there. But just to say, we know that in terms of service versus product, there are certain disadvantages that, you know, especially a service business, there's various disadvantages that can be interpreted when you're applying for Edge, but that's something we've been aware of for a while, and that we do make allowances for and exceptions for in certain areas. You know, if someone's bringing a product onto stage, it's a bit easier to demonstrate than it is to demonstrate your service. So there are various allowances that we'll make, and the assessors take into consideration when assessing. So don't get too caught up if you feel that you're not able to demonstrate to the same extent as someone who's maybe got a product that can, or demonstrate the circular nature of that a bit clearer. So don't be concerned too much about that. Yep. Sorry, Ken. Sorry.
Yeah. So another kind of follow-up issue that maybe some folks have already experienced is we've sought to get EIS assurance in terms of investment, where it's beneficial for investors, where they're taking risks. The HMRC will not give EIS for companies that are renting or leasing their product, which is actually contrary to what you're trying to encourage, which is, you know, is a bit of a blow to us, because that's our business model is around leasing and renting. So there's a disconnect between, and that's HMRC. So, you know, they need to be on board if we want to encourage people to do that, and for business to get investment from the investment community, that somehow needs to change. But that's just an observation. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that.
It's a fair point. You know, it's like, you know, as Peter was saying, it's the landscape's shifting, but it's not shifted. You know, it's gradually there's areas need to change in several places. So yeah, it's a fair point.
Yeah, it's good to be aware of that. I think that's something that we can chat about internally, because that is contradictory to what we're obviously trying to promote and encourage. So.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
So I don't think there's anything else. I think that's so. Yeah, again. So thank you very much, Peter and Louisa. That was very beneficial, I think, or extremely beneficial for all of us, myself included. There was some jaw-dropping stats in there that I wasn't clued up on, so no, that's been useful for me too. I think it's been especially useful for anyone who's come in for the Circular Edge award in mind, and also obviously the funding, but also the follow-on support that comes from Zero Waste Scotland, which is invaluable, you know. So I think that's been a great session, and I think just that kind of clear-cut view of what a circular economy looks like and how it relates to everyday business has been, you know, it's been fantastic for anyone listening, and it will be for those going forward that get to see the recording and you know, benefit from this. So thank you for your time, and again, I think that we can call it a day there.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.